Yes, for sure. But those things aren't what make you goth, just like those things aren't what make you a metalhead. I have more understanding for why now, because I have seen some things recently that I'm just like, what? Okay, so today we are revisiting the goth tag. Like, I know that's so old school. People on YouTube aren't really doing tags anymore as far as I know. But that said, one of the first videos that I did on this channel 3 years ago was the goth tag, and that was sort of a way for me to introduce myself. So I just thought it would be fun to revisit that 3 years later, because a few things have changed and some things I just think are really funny. So not that I'm great at doing makeup or anything, but I definitely think I've gotten better since that video. Not all the time, I still struggle on certain days, but just looking at my makeup in this video and knowing how hard I tried, it's just funny but also awesome to see how far I've come, and knowing that on most days my makeup looks better than that. Hey, what is your favorite band? That is a loaded question. Also, like, I'm sad to say I just don't listen to music as much as I used to. What's different from the original tag is I actively listen to music now. When I first did this tag, I was kind of coming off of a weird phase where I wasn't really listening to music. I felt like my musical identity was a little bit lost. I couldn't just easily say, oh, these are the bands that I'm really into right now. I was watching YouTube all the time, and that kind of always became my background noise and what I was listening to. I still watch a lot of YouTube now, but I also actively listen to a lot of music, which is different than before. So that's a positive change in my opinion in the last 3 years. What's your favorite band? Okay, so my favorite band nowadays is Cattle Decapitation. Like, love them, and they're a metal band, they're a death metal band. Not goth.
Hand in your goth cards, you are banished!
Some people's litmus test, that means I'm not goth. I really don't care. As I mentioned before, my favorite goth band is the Sisters of Mercy. Alien Sex Fiend is a really close second though.
Now I'm feeling zombified!
I really love Alien Sex Fiend. And more recently, I've gotten very much into Scary Black. Probably one of my newer favorites, along with Slaughterhouse. I would consider a death rock band, and when I asked on Gothy Reddit, they agreed, the moderators agreed, so there's that. I've also really reignited my love for Scary Bitches. There's just so much to appreciate about that band.
The deadliest weapon is the art of surprise.
Question number 4. What do you believe to be the basis of Gothic subculture? Now, this is probably one of the more important questions. This is a subject that has been beaten to death. If it was a horse, there would be nothing left. It would have just been beaten to a pulp, and there would just be nothing but dust left. But I understand why, because there's still so much confusion out there about what goth is, and people believing that if you listen to Deftones, you're goth, and it's like, what? You know? So I understand, but it's a subject that's really been revisited a lot. All that said, even as someone who grew up in the subculture, even as someone who knew the difference between goth and nu metal and all these things from the age of 14, coming back into the scene in my late 20s, early 30s, I myself was a little confused about what could constitute someone as a goth, even knowing the differences, even knowing that like listening to metal didn't make you goth. What was confusing was people who listened to goth saying things like,
It's a mindset. It's about finding the beauty in the darkness. It's about, liking spooky stuff.
Or when being asked, when did you first get into goth?
Oh, when I fell in love with Edgar Allan Poe.
And it's like, okay, all of that has nothing to do with goth, but this was all coming from people who liked goth music. So someone who was kind of coming into the goth YouTube space in my late 20s, early 30s, I was a little bit confused about that. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, okay, well, if you've got like 2 out of 3, can you still be goth even if you don't listen to goth music? Editing me here. Oh God, don't look at me. I just want to clarify what I meant by the confusion. So what I was confused about was, like, even if you look up goth and you look at the official goth Wikipedia, they still link back to like gothic literature as being part of the goth subculture. But now I understand that that's just a lot of confusion being perpetuated by people who, even if they are goth, are maybe just sharing their opinions about, well, I think it's about the darkness, I think it's about this or that. When I think what we've really come to agree on is it's really just about the music, period, listening to the music. Now, my original answer, I went into like this whole thing about how the music was based on punk and punk is about resistance. And that's a whole interesting can of worms too. Goth as a subculture isn't necessarily about resistance. And now there's this whole thing where, like, can you be conservative and be goth? Do you qualify as a goth if you're, conservative? Where the goth scene has traditionally been a place where people could kind of like defy the norms, like even gender-wise. Like, a lot of gender bending happens within the goth subculture. Now we're getting away from the fact that at the core of the subculture it's the music, but just like as a scene as a whole, it's like a place of fluidity and expression a lot of the times. So, there's a lot of debate about, like, are there other qualifiers for goth? At this point, I'm just gonna have to keep it simple and say, if you listen to goth music, you're goth. If you don't listen to goth music, obviously you're not goth. It's pretty much the basis of the subculture. And like Elitist Joe says, you're never gonna be as goth as, or wait, what does he say? No one's ever gonna think you're as goth as you think you are, or something like that. And again, I think like people have their own litmus tests, is that how you say it? Litmus tests as to what constitutes goth.
When you put the red litmus paper in and you pull it out, the red litmus paper turns blue as well.
Hand in your goth cards, you are banished!
Like, for some people, they're very purist and they're like, if you're not only listening to goth or not listening to goth the majority of the time, you're not goth.
Hand in your goth card!
You're gonna have people who say if your favorite band isn't goth,
You are banished!
but then you have people who say if you listen to the music, that's it. Period. You don't have to dress a certain way. You don't even necessarily have to like go to events. There are solitary goths, there are online goths who have like community in online spaces but not in real life. So there's just a whole spectrum of people who actually listen to and enjoy the goth subgenres of music, which is what it is all about. But I just wanted to kind of touch on the confusion that even I felt for a while, that I think I even felt back then when I was recording the original tag. And again, that came from people who were goths, who were listening to goth music. But now I know, liking Edgar Allan Poe definitely doesn't make you goth. It's really about the music. And that's pretty much it. Now, is there overlaps? Like, do a lot of goths like Edgar Allan Poe? Yes, for sure. Do a lot of goths like spooky, creepy things year round? Yes, for sure. But those things aren't what make you goth, just like those things aren't what make you a metalhead. So there's that. If we have to beat the horse for the millionth time. What do you dislike about being goth? What do I dislike maybe about the subculture?
Hand in your goth card!
Nothing. Really nothing. Especially now that I'm more confident in myself and who I am, and revisiting in-person events and diving into newer music, newer releases. I wouldn't say there's anything that stands out in particular that I don't like. I will say, I think I already touched on that. The only thing is just like some of these conversations in the online spaces can get so repetitive and it's kind of boring. But I have more understanding for why now, because I have seen some things recently that I'm just like, what? Like there was like some hip hop song about like I need a goth girl with slit wrists and like all this stuff. And it's just like perpetuating these really harmful narratives that end up in fetishization and violence towards actual real goth people in real life, or particularly goth women, but I think it could just happen to anyone who's not even just goth but dark alternative. And just the comment section for one of these videos that I saw, people were just so misinformed. Like one guy who is obviously my age based on the things he was saying was going on about how like, oh, back in my day you said things so poetically in the goth scene. They're basically saying the same thing that this hip-hop artist was saying, they just said it more poetically. For example, cut my life into pieces, this is my last resort, which is a Papa Roach lyric, which has absolutely nothing to do with goths. I'm like, people out here are really so confused. And this person was like obviously in their 30s because they referenced growing up with that, and I grew up with that, and I'm 34. So I understand why this conversation keeps coming up and why I'm talking about it now, because people continue to be confused. So like I get it, but I also just think it's more fun to share what we enjoy about the subculture versus constantly harping on this when you can't control everybody, sadly, you know? But I'm not going to say that there's no value to continuing to have these conversations, because I've even changed the way that I approach content. I'll make sure that I have like goth playlists and, you know, have in the description that wearing Killstar doesn't make you goth, but listening to these bands does, you know? So I've changed the way that I approach things. When I first started this channel, I did say stuff like goth fashion, which that could be a whole debate. Like, is there goth fashion? Like, is there metal fashion? You know what I mean? So yes and no, but since there's so much confusion around that already, I just stick to using that word when it actually comes to the music or subculture nowadays. So it's even changed the way I approach things, so I get it, but that's the only thing I don't like. Is just like, here's the thing I don't like about it, that gets so much more attention. So if you're talking about a new band, or if you're talking about like a new release or sharing a YouTuber, it doesn't get as much attention as harping on these same old topics. And that's kind of what I find annoying, is like we're kind of our own worst enemies online sometimes. Because this isn't happening in real life out there. We're just having fun, you know? Enjoying the music, enjoying dressing up, having fun. That's the goth tag revisited. Some answers stayed exactly the same, some answers definitely changed. But yeah, thanks for watching. Take care of yourself, because this is the most important thing, and I will see you in the next video.